listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, it's the frightening new frontier of coercive control and family violence. Abusers are now weaponising smart devices and even the software in cars to spy, abuse and or manipulate victims and survivors. We take a look at the way abusers can now use new technology and what you can do if you need help. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Monday, the 1st of December. The Defence Minister has confirmed Australia is keeping a close eye on a Chinese Navy Flotilla currently in the Philippine Sea. As concerns grow, it may be heading towards Australia. Reports emerged last week authorities were tracking the movements of the flotilla. Here is Richard Miles a short time ago.
And we do not have a sense of where it is going. But we continue to monitor it as we monitor all movements until we know that task groups are not coming to Australia.
The confirmation comes as the Defence Minister alongside the Defence Industry Minister Pat Conroy announced the biggest shake-up to defence in 50 years. The government promising the reforms will deliver better bang for buck for taxpayers and ensure projects are delivered on time and on budget. A warning, the content of this next story is confronting. 4 Sydney men have been charged in connection with an international satanic child sex abuse material ring. Police allege the men were involved in distributing child sex abuse material through a website administered internationally. Strike Force detectives executed 6 search warrants in Waterloo, Ultimo and Malabar last week. Here is the Sex Crimes Squad Commander, Superintendent Jane Doherty.
Police will allege in court that the initial examination of those devices has discovered thousands of videos depicting the abuse of live children aged between babies and 12 years of age. Amongst these deplorable images were also a number of videos depicting the sexual abuse of animals.
All 4 men have been refused bail and will return to court next year. And after almost 2 months after the multi-million-dollar heist at the Louvre, France has been hit by another high-profile robbery. This time, more than $150,000 worth of snails have been stolen from a farm north of Paris. The snails had reportedly been earmarked for Christmas orders from some of Europe's top restaurants. Experts say the scale of the theft indicates it was a well-organised network. Now it's time to get into our deep dive with the CEO of Full Stop Australia, Karen Bevan, on the alarming rise of smart technology being weaponised by perpetrators of domestic and family violence. Before we begin, a warning that this chat contains descriptions of violence against women and coercive control that may be distressing for some listeners. Karen, thanks so much for joining us. Can we start by asking, what is technology-facilitated abuse?
So technology-facilitated abuse is when a domestic abuser of, any kind weaponises electronic devices and, smart devices against someone in order to control, harass, intimidate or abuse them. So it might be, for example, installing tracking apps on your phone, or it could be, as we've heard about today, using software on your car in order to limit where you can go. So unfortunately, we're really still learning about, how this might look. And, some of the sort of entry level, I suppose, abuse is very serious. If you think about like weaponising people's social media accounts by hacking into their Facebook or Instagram accounts and posting things on their behalf, or even that kind of process of using those air tags to maybe drop it in the teddy bear that goes home with the kids in order to find out where the partner's living so that the ex-partner can, track them down. It's a really wide range of types of behaviours, and it's a new spin on a really old style of coercion and control.
What's really concerning, I think, Karen, even if we see of certain generations, especially teenagers with Snapchat, with Snap Maps, it's become almost commonplace and normalised to know where everyone is at all times. And sometimes they can be strangers.
Yeah, I think this is like the broader picture that we've got to be thinking about when we understand this type of abuse, because we are in a world where we're really much more connected and geolocated constantly by the people in our lives. And like everything, we start that with an excited sense of how to connect with others and, the excitement of knowing where your friends are and being able to meet up with them. What we often fail to think about is how those kinds of technologies can be weaponized by people with bad intent, with the desire to control. I do think, though, you make the point about the normalization of some of these kinds of behaviors. And we do need to think about that. And those are the conversations we need to be having with our kids and with our partners around what are the expectations that people have a right to know where you are. It's super important that we're talking about that, because that is the sort of frame in which some of this behavior is happening.
I'm really glad that you've brought that up, because it has become normalised, and there's a whole generation and so many people growing up thinking it is normalised to know where someone is 24/7. Talk us through those really specific boundaries where it becomes coercive control.
So what we know about coercive control is essentially it's the operating framework of domestic and family violence. It's the way that people act in order to build an environment where increasingly, and usually this happens over time, although it can happen quite quickly too, where we build a sort of environment in which people's behaviour slowly becomes more controlled, where there might be a sense of being able to manage people's emotions or control how people spend money, where they go, who they connect with. And what tends to happen is that, this framework gets put in place, and then you're starting to feel like it's normal for your partner to ask to have a look at your phone and see who you've been talking to on your text messages, or it's normal for you to share your password, or it's normal for you to submit a grocery receipt, and all of that in order to justify, what you've been buying, or make an argument about why your kids are allowed to do an activity. This framework where people's sense of decision-making capability is constantly undermined by this control really sets the framework into which we then see the weaponization of other elements. So while we hear a lot in talking about domestic and family violence, we hear a lot about physical abuse, we're hearing more and more about financial abuse, which is another part of this. When we think about kind of weaponizing online spaces and weaponizing smart devices against people, none of these things happen in isolation. They're part of a much bigger picture that really undermine people's ability to have information and control over what happens.
Karen, there was one story that came out today with allegations that one woman's software within her vehicle had been manipulated. They were incredibly disturbing allegations.
Absolutely. So this idea that someone might be able, theoretically to interfere with the software on your car. And I think the allegations in this case are that it limited how fast she could drive. So if you think about the terrifying nature of that for someone who is reliant on a car, as most of us are, particularly, driving our kids around or going, and doing errands or going to work, I think the fear that this could happen is really serious, but also there are real safety concerns if the software, in someone's car is being altered, that it could be very dangerous, that, it could stall in places where you're unable to control the impact, and it could be a real risk to your safety or the safety of others.
And you make a great point also again, Karen, it's incredibly dangerous. I can't begin to imagine how terrifying that would have been for that poor woman to know that your car stalls, and you rightfully say that could have put her life or others in danger. It's not just these cars and this new software we've got to be concerned about regarding coercive control, but also there's now serious evidence about this type of behaviour in a lot of smart devices in someone's home, including a smart fridge, a smart vacuum cleaner. Tell us all about these products and the real concerns.
Yeah, so I guess, there are some incredible products out there, and they're, I suppose they've been designed to help make our lives easier and more accessible. And for many people, it's worth saying, some of these devices really help people with access needs, So it's not all about the device is the problem, it's how they're designed and how they're used that we need to be thinking about. But things like, for example, these kind of smart vacuum cleaners that go around your house and get under your lounge. Some days I wish for one. But in order to function, some of them have cameras on them in order to map the area that they're going to be cleaning. They can be used by someone, spying or watching. They can also be switched on and off externally. So you can imagine that there are ways that they could be used by people seeking to cause harm and distress and harassment. Similarly, smart fridges can be locked externally. So you might be at home and you might not be able to access your fridge. So all of those things, really can be problematic. But I guess at the heart of this is how are we designing these sorts of products which are bringing, great things into many people's lives and can be incredibly fantastic in our homes? The question really goes back to, did anyone think about how these could be used by people with ill intent? And I guess, we've heard the E-Safety Commissioner speaking today, and the Minister for Social Services has also been speaking, and the Domestic Family and Sexual Violence Commissioner has been speaking today about the importance of instilling those critical elements of safety by design in the way we design and develop products. So that's the kind of work that the way to get these challenges addressed is to make sure that when we design it, we think about what are the safety elements we might need to put in place. Because unfortunately, the evidence is pretty conclusive that people who use coercive control, people who abuse, so those domestic violence abusers, they will use any methodology, unfortunately, to continue their reign of control. So what we need to know is that whatever products we're designing, we have to think about how they're going to be used by people with ill intent.
And Karen, if someone is being abused or they are concerned that they could be manipulated through this technology, what advice would you give them and where can they go and get help?
Across Australia, there's a wide range of services that respond. And, it's interesting to me as a person who's worked alongside the domestic violence sector over many years to see how it is that now frontline domestic violence workers have really stepped into the space of supporting people to actually understand the kind of devices they have, to scan them and see what's safe and what's not. So I would really say that there are people who can help. So reach out to your domestic violence helplines, state by state. 1-800-RESPECT is the government's line. Our trauma counselling service, 1-800 full stop. And they can help you find your local service where there are often domestic violence frontline workers who will partner with, safety providers to come and do all of that work, like check your phone to see if there's any apps or tracking activated, have a look at some of your devices to see where they're connected to and disconnect some of those things. And so I would say that if you're worried, reach out for some support. The E-Safety Commissioner was reporting today that in the year since she set up the helpline for frontline workers, she's had 20,000 calls across the country from DV workers seeking to get advice about these issues. And so we know it's out there. We know it's a challenge. But what I'd say to anyone who's worried about this, you can seek help, so please do. But also, if you're worried, this is a really good time to have a look at your devices and to check in with what you've got and what you're connected to, if you've got that ability, but you can also seek help. It's not your fault if somebody has deliberately misused software that is attached to your phone or your devices. No one ever designed these devices to be used that way. And so for some people, they'd be like, why did I let this happen? Well, you didn't let it happen. Someone did this to you and you deserve help and support around that. And for family and friends who are alongside people in this difficult situation, remember that person didn't make this happen. Someone's chosen to betray a trust. And that's why I always say, this is a new spin on a long-term challenge that we have around the use of power and control in relationships in domestic and family violence.
Such an important conversation. Really appreciate your analysis and advice. Thanks so much, Karen.
Thanks for your time, Natasha.
That was CEO of Full Stop Australia, Karen Bevan. And if this discussion raised any concerns or issues, or you think you may be a victim of technology-facilitated abuse, you can contact 1-800-RESPECT. That number is 1-800-737-732. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. And we'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.